Good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar, EDA and HBCUs, Cultivating Strategic Engagement for Regional Economic Development. I'm Brett Schwartz, Associate Director at the NATO Research Foundation, and it's my pleasure to host today's session, which is a joint offering from the U.S. Economic Development Administration and the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. This presentation is an extension of the 2020 White House National HBCU Week and Conference that was held virtually back in September. So today's goal is to provide the HBCU community with valuable information describing EDA tools, programs, and partners, and how HBCUs can effectively engage with these resources to support the development of inclusive, innovative, and competitive regional economies. We'll be hearing from federal staff at EDA and the Minority Business Development Administration, or agency, as well as leadership from HBCUs who will share their experiences and best practices in promoting economic and workforce development, community resilience, business training, and much more. Now, this is the first of 3 webinars, which we'll be holding over the next week. Today's focus is the EDA Austin region, which will be followed by sessions for the EDA Atlanta and Philadelphia regions next week. Now, here at the NATO Research Foundation, we're particularly excited about these webinars. We are the nonprofit research affiliate of NATO, the National Association of Development Organizations. And NATO is a membership association of regional development organizations all across the country. And these include the National Network of Economic Development Districts, or EDDs, which you'll hear much more about on today's call. Now, strengthening the connections between EDDs and HBCUs is an important aspiration, and one that can lead to multiple positive outcomes to support regional economic development. So I'm really looking forward to today's conversation to discuss ways to leverage federal resources to support HBCUs and their home communities. We've got a lot to cover, but before we kick things off, just want to share some overview of today's session and also some webinar logistics. So as you can see up here on the screen, we've got a jam-packed session. Following my opening remarks, I'll be turning things over for a welcome from EDA from Dennis Alvord, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic Development and the Chief Operating Officer. And then we're going to turn to 2 modules for this session. The first one being HBCUs and the EDA ecosystem. First, we'll be hearing from David Ives from EDA, who is the Interim Director for Performance and National Programs Division and Planning Coordinator. And Dave will be talking about the CEDS and Economic Development Districts. Following Dave, we'll hear from Bernadette Grafton, also from EDA, who is a Program Analyst at the University Center Coordinator, where she'll talk more about university centers and some capacity building and technical assistance resources available. Then we'll turn to hear some case studies and examples of what's happening on the ground with HBCUs by first hearing from Dr. Donald Andrews, who is the Dean of the College of Business at Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And he'll be followed by Justina Shaw and Jimmy Henry. Justina is the project lead for the Rural Workforce Academy, and Jimmy is the program specialist for community and economic development at Prairie View A&M University in Prairie View, Texas. After that, we'll shift into our second module, which will talk about accessing relevant federal and capital resources. We'll hear first from Doug Lynett, who is the Director for Economic Development Integration at EDA, to talk more about those resources and cross-agency opportunities. And then finally, we'll hear from Joanne Hill, who is the Chief of Office of Business Development at the Minority Business Development Administration, who will talk about some exciting and interesting programs and opportunities to access capital through MBDA. Following that, we'll have plenty of time for questions and conversations with our panelists. So if you do have a question, feel free to type it in on the right side of the screen. You should see a questions box, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. We also received few questions in advance during the registration, so we'll make sure to get to those. Just a reminder, today's session is being recorded, and a copy of the recording and all of the slides that you see, and there's quite a few, but all the slides will be available to you shortly at EDA's website at eda.gov. So next slide. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dennis Alvord, who will welcome all of you from EDA and officially kick off today's presentations. Dennis is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic Development and the Chief Operating Officer at EDA. In these roles, he is responsible for enterprise-wide operations and program execution. Active in the department, he was elected as co-chair of the Department Management Council, comprised of senior executives from all of the Department of Commerce's principal operating units. Previously, as senior advisor to the Deputy Secretary, Dennis worked on a broad portfolio of department-wide management, operations, programs, and policy issues. So with that, Dennis, I'd like to turn it over to you for some remarks, and thanks again for kicking things off.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much, Brett. I'd really be remiss if I didn't begin by thanking our our friends and great partners at the National Association of Development Organizations for hosting and moderating today's webinar. Really appreciate that. I'd also like to thank Joanne Hill, Chief of the Minority Business Development Agency's Office of Business Development, for being with us here today. Joanne, we're looking forward to hearing from you shortly. To all of you online with us today, including leaders from historically Black colleges and universities and economic development districts from across EDA's Austin region, we thank you for your participation and interest in this important webinar. The work that all of you do to create economic opportunities in your communities is critical, and EDA is proud of our long history working with you to support locally driven economic development strategies. As you probably know, EDA has a long history of working with HBCUs through a variety of EDA programs, principally through our regional offices, but really across all of what we do at EDA. The most visible example of EDA's ongoing partnership with HBCU community consists of the 5 schools that have been designated as EDA University Centers. Those include Southern University and A&M College here in our Austin regional office territory. EDA's University Center program makes the resources of universities available to the broader economic development community, helping regional actors to overcome challenges and capitalize on opportunities. As many of you know, EDA also works in close partnership with the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. In September, we were honored to be invited by Jonathan Holyfield to participate in the White House 2020 virtual HBCU conference. There, EDA, together with 4 of our sister DOC bureaus, including MBDA, who's with us here again today, provided an introduction to relevant DOC resources that can be accessed and leveraged to support HBCU missions and priorities. I really would like to thank Jonathan for his leadership and partnership through both this virtual conference and over the last several years. Today's webinar is an in-depth follow-up to September's panel and is designed to provide you with an opportunity to learn more about the EDA regional ecosystem and potential roles for HBCUs. Joanne will also provide additional in-depth information on MBDA resources. So EDA, as the only federal agency whose sole mission is to support local regional economic development, we see strategic planning as a necessary first step to establishing a foundation to support the development of vibrant, diverse regional economies. Therefore, we support regional planning efforts through planning grants that are awarded primarily to economic development districts, or EDD partners. EDDs occupy really a central position of importance within EDA's regional economic development ecosystems. They rely on the participation and input of local and regional partners to create and maintain comprehensive economic development strategies, or CEDS. Those are terms you're probably going to hear a lot of today. Participation in the CEDS development process provides these partner organizations with an opportunity to ensure that their various priorities and objectives are reflected in the final plan and strategy for the region. So I'd like to note that EDA's efforts to promote opportunity zones have been key in kind of targeting investment-ready locations under these strategies. And in January 2020, we updated our CEDS content guidelines to help communities across the country maximize their ability to attract investment into opportunity zones. The inherently regional focus of the CEDS provides a unique platform to capture and promote the advantages of opportunity zone communities. Today's webinar is the first step in what EDA hopes will be a longer process of establishing collaborative partnerships between the country's various HBCUs and regional EDDs, and particularly collaboration in the context of that CEDS, or Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. We also look forward today to letting you know more about EDA's Economic Development Integration function and how it can help you to plug into a wide range of resources including federal, state, local, and philanthropic, to achieve better outcomes for your communities and other communities across America. By working together, we will advance efforts by HBCUs to join other regional organizations at the table to contribute to the CEDS process and to learn more about the many assets available to them to support regional economic development priorities. It's a win-win for all, and I thank each of you for your participation today and for your focus on improving economic conditions in your communities. Please enjoy the webinar, and please do not hesitate to continue to reach out if there's anything that we can do at EDA to assist you. Thanks again for your participation.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis. Really appreciate those remarks and putting today's session in context, and more importantly, for your leadership at EDA. You're truly a rock, so thank you so much for that and getting us started. So with that, we're going to turn our presentations over to our panelists, and we're going to start now with David Ives from EDA, who will be discussing EDDs and the CEDS, which Dennis talked about briefly, and really about how the CEDS serves as this kind of key foundation and roadmap for economic development planning at the regional level. So Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Brett. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is David Ives. I'm the Interim Director of the Performance and National Programs Division at EDA headquarters in Washington, D.C., but I also serve as EDA's planning coordinator. And it's really this idea of economic development planning that Dennis first mentioned that I want to focus on today, because it's this concept of economic planning where we really believe HBCUs can most effectively be integrated into community and regional economic development. Next slide, please. I want to start by talking about what economic development is, and it's really about bringing new dollars and generating wealth in a community or region. And at EDA, we very strongly believe there's a public sector role, EDA's role in particular, and that role is about helping communities and regions build the capacity for economic development, so that those new dollars can flow into that particular area or region. And capacity building that capacity means helping better position that community so that the private sector can succeed. In effect, by building, improving, or more effectively leveraging regional assets so businesses want to form and or grow in that particular community or region. This capacity building can mean different things to different communities, from building infrastructure such as roads, water sewer systems, broadband, to develop networks, partnerships, and collaborations focused on economic development. It really depends on what each community needs. Regardless of the type of capacity building, EDA strongly believes that good economic development starts with good economic development planning. And to that end, as Dennis has mentioned, EDA has established a national network of 392 economic development districts, or EDDs. These are mostly groupings of counties or other areas that have come together to say, hey, we have a common set of assets, common set of challenges, and together we can more effectively build the capacity for economic development. The primary mission of each EDD is to develop and implement an economic development plan, the CEDS, as was already mentioned. And the CEDS is really a regional blueprint about how that particular region is going to collectively build that capacity for economic development. It's a collaboration between the public, private, nonprofit, and educational sectors focused on identifying and leveraging regional assets. Yes, it's a document, but it's also a process, so please keep that in mind. And we really think that it's this concept and this process around the CEDS where HBCUs fit in. Because HBCUs are regional assets, they should be part of the economic development planning that's undertaken through this CEDS process. And to that end, we've added new language to our CEDS content guidelines, which encourages EDDs to engage with HBCUs as part of the planning process as a key regional asset. The CEDS content guidelines are a set of recommended actions, examples, and tools that can be used by EDDs and other regional planning entities to develop impactful CEDS. Within the new language focused on HBCUs, we point not only to the strengths that HBCUs bring to the areas in which they operate, for example, from a workforce and talent perspective, but we also point to specific examples of where HBCUs and EDDs have already been working together successfully on economic development. Next slide. In addition to the recommendations with the CEDS content guidelines, we've also established, with the help of the Center on Rural Innovation and our friends at NATO, a HBCU EDD overlay map and contact list. And you can see portions of both of those here on the screen. The map and contact list are intended to help identify which EDDs have a HBCU operating within their borders and help HBCUs determine within which EDD they're located. Both tools are a quick and easy way for HBCUs and EDDs to connect and begin working together on economic development. And I should just point out that 83% of all HBCUs are located within an EDD. So for most HBCUs, that's going to be a great place to develop a really strong relationship focused on economic development. As noted on the slide, both the map and the contact list are located on NATO's CEDS Central site, which has a wealth of information on the CEDS process and economic development planning in general. It's a really great resource. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Next slide, please. And finally, I just wanted to say a couple things around our website, where you can find out more information on the CEDS, and the CEDS process can be found at www.eda.gov. And there's a wealth of other information there associated with a lot of the things that you're going to be hearing about coming up. So with that, I will turn it back to Brett. Thank you.
David, thank you so much. Really appreciate that, that introduction to the importance and value of the districts and the CEDS in this entire process. So next we're going to turn to Bernadette Grafton, also at EDA, who will talk a little bit more about EDA's University Center Network and the capacity building and technical assistance resources that are available. So Bernadette.
Great, thank you. Next slide. As Brett said, my name is Bernadette Grafton. I've been with EDA for about 4 years, and I've been the University Center Program Coordinator for much of that time. Just want to provide a brief overview of the UC program and then dive into some examples for you. So the UC program is a competitively based partnership between EDA and academic institutions. This really focuses on bringing the resources and the skill sets that universities have to the economic development practitioner community. First and foremost, it's a technical assistance program. It leverages university assets and also engages a variety of stakeholders and partners to build regional capacity for economic development. Some of our most impactful EDA-funded university centers collaborate with other EDA partners, such as economic development districts, as Dave was talking about earlier. They provide expertise and technical assistance to develop, implement, and support regional strategies. But you can also see here on the slide, there are a number of other partners that our university centers work with, such as their state offices and workforce development boards, nonprofit organizations, business and industry associations, and then other federal agencies in cities and counties. So there are a number of partners. Then when all of these work together, we've really seen much more of a strong value add to the regions that our university centers are in. Next slide. The University Center program has been in existence since 1966 and has changed quite a bit since then in terms of the type of awards and the type of funding. It's important to reiterate here that university centers are funded on a competitive basis, and this is for a 5-year period of performance where university centers are evaluated on an annual basis, and the next year's funding is based on that. Next slide. The last competition that we had was held in FY18, and the program received an allocation of about $7.4 million. This has actually been pretty stable over the last couple of cycles of competition. The annual awards that were selected in past years have generally ranged from about $80,000 to $200,000 each, and there have been about 8 to 10 awards per participating region. Just to emphasize here, we have 2 regions that participate during each competition. So every time we have a competition, only 2 EDA regional offices participate, and we go through a cycle. We've been on a break for the last couple of years with the competition while we got everyone switched over to a 5-year period of performance, as was indicated on the last slide. Next slide. All 64 currently funded university centers can be viewed on our website, which is updated regularly to make sure that each university center's profile page reflects the most updated information possible. This is a new feature that we have on our website where each university center receives their own profile page where you can host your resources or tools that you've developed, and as well as link to your website. So this is just a visual representation of where all of the university centers are located across the US. And we'll move forward to the next slide. Of the 64, we currently have 5 that are HBCUs, as you can see here in this table, which is also on our website, and each of these has their own profile page as well. This is one of the most visible examples of EDA's ongoing partnership with the HBCU community, and we've seen a lot of great activities happening with these university centers, and we're excited to hear from one of them later in this presentation from Southern University. Next slide. The next competition will be this year, FY 2021. We've got the Chicago Regional Office and the Philadelphia Regional Office participating for this competition. The Austin Regional Office won't be up until FY 2023. However, that doesn't mean you can't start learning about the program, getting familiar with it, and just preparing ahead of time. That's actually a wise move to make. So if you are interested, I would recommend reaching out to your regional point of contact for that. Next slide. A little bit on eligibility. All the eligible applicants are listed here on this slide, but in a nutshell, all accredited institutions of higher education as well as community colleges are eligible for this program. There is a matching requirement of 50% of the total project cost, and we always recommend that you read the NOFO very carefully, as well as speak with your EDA regional point of contact with any questions prior to submitting an application. Next slide. University center activities can be bucketed into these 4 basic categories. We've got those that are conducting applied research and providing technical assistance, delivering educational trainings and workshops, supporting business expansion, innovation, and high growth entrepreneurship. But we also have some that are more focused on prototyping and product development, commercialization, and tech transfer. And then other university centers tend to do more of the feasibility studies, analyzing data, and then providing business counseling services. But it doesn't mean that you have to stick to one category. We've got university centers that do a hodgepodge of all of these things. But most UCs really focus their efforts on assisting units of local government and nonprofit organizations in planning and implementing their regional economic development strategies and projects. As I said before, this is all about the partnerships that are there on the ground, and that's where we found the most successful university centers to be. Typical actions provided by the UCs are really just targeted commercialization of research and workforce development and business counseling. It's all very targeted and meeting the needs of the region, responding to the needs that are evident there on the ground. Other UCs can work with local organizations doing feasibility studies, analyzing data, and convening seminars and workshops, as I said before. But coming back to it, the purpose is to leverage existing university resources. So that's where you need to start with, is what do you have available to you now? Competitive applications document strong partnerships. So it's not just about stating that you have the partnerships, but showing what those partners are and how they're going to contribute to the EDA funded programs or activities. That is the key here. Next slide. I want to just provide you with a couple of specific examples and draw your attention to the first one as well as the second to last bullet here. So the University of Wisconsin Extension provides data analysis and also serves as a data hub for economic development organizations, such as economic development districts. This has been a really great resource for economic development organizations in the state of Wisconsin, just to be able to have that resource that is based in a university, providing that kind of data that would otherwise be too difficult to obtain themselves. Also working with EDDs, both Bowling Green State University, Center for Regional Development, and the University of Oregon work extensively on economic resilience strategies and helping EDDs in their regions to update their SEDS to reflect that. They work hand in hand and they're very engaged throughout the years, just going to each other's meetings, making sure that they're on the same page, and really seeking to have that strong partnership like we've been discussing. Next slide. Lastly, here are some examples of some program outputs and outcomes, as well as the value add, just to give you an example of some of the things that we're seeing coming out of university centers. It's always great when we have job creation and retention, but as I said in the beginning of my presentation, this is all about building capacity on the ground for economic development. So most of the university centers are focused on bridging access to university resources and providing that research, that database to economic development districts and other organizations in the region. We've got training in economic development as one type of activity that our university centers provide, but also just responding to the needs of communities when it comes to disaster recovery and resilience planning, especially now with the pandemic. So that is, next slide. Yes, that is all I had for you today. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bernadette. Really appreciate you kind of highlighting the real power of the University Center network. And with that, we're gonna turn onto the ground to those university centers. And so we're gonna hear first from Dr. Donald Andrews, who's the Dean of College of Business at Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He's gonna talk about a wide range of initiatives underway in that region. So Dr. Andrews, it's all yours.
Hey, thank you, Brett. And as Bernadette indicated, we are a university center. So if we can go to the next slide. I've got a lot of slides, so we're going to be hitting Brett a lot. Basically, HBCUs have been around since the late 1800s. Booker T. Washington Tuskegee Institute is an example of the role of HBCUs in economic development across the South. Let's go to the next slide. And basically, we see the economic transformation that has taken place. And basically, we've moved from agriculture to industrial to now a service economy. And we realize that we have to be aware of these transformations. Let's go to the next slide. And basically, as far as the university center is concerned, we're concerned about talent, innovation, and place. We look upon this in terms of our teaching, our research, and our extension out into the community in terms of the impact that we can have. Let's move to the next slide, Brent. And so we've already talked about university centers. That last portion of this slide, more or less, the EDA University Centers programs are specifically designed to marshal the resources at the university level and provide these resources to the community, especially those that are in chronic and acute distress. And HBCUs, where they're located, I think we've already looked at this slide to some extent. We're located more or less in primarily the southern, southeastern, and southwestern states. And HBCUs more or less have a history of generating high outcomes for the African-American community in terms of bachelor degrees, in terms of research and things of this nature. So basically, sometimes we say HBCUs are punching above their weight. Let's move to the next slide. As far as a university is concerned, we're in the College of Business. And our mission, more or less, the University Center program aligns greatly with our mission in terms of effective instruction, impactful research, and innovative community engagement. We have programs at the undergraduate level as well as the MBA. We also have a JD MBA program, and our University Center fits in, especially in terms of our overall goals and mission. Next slide. Now, in terms of our University Center, our goal more or less is to help in terms of economic development in the state of Louisiana. We provide tangible programs that help existing businesses and also help new venture opportunities. Our objectives are in the areas of workforce development, advancing entrepreneurship and innovation, and applied research. We can go to the next slide. We work primarily in 3 EDDs, Economic Development Planning District. We work in District 2 here in Louisiana, which is the Baton Rouge area, District 6, which is the Comanche Delta in the Alexandria area, and the North Delta, which is Region 8 in terms of the Monroe area. So we work with these EDDs closely. We work with their directors. Let's move with the next slide and help them also in their SEDS development. Right now, we're going to go over some examples of some of the things that we have been doing. We realize that rural communities are distressed and a lot of the areas we work in are rural. And so we're here to help those individuals and assist and enable them to benefit from the economic growth that takes place at the national level. Let's move to the next slide. This is an example of some of the areas around the state that we've worked in on a continuous basis. So we're moving around, and Monroe is probably the longest distance we go, which is about 200 miles from the Baton Rouge area. Let's move on around, Brett, to the next slide. As an example of some of the areas we're working in, this is an example of Tallulah, which is in Madison Parish, which is in the upper Mississippi or the lower Mississippi Delta. And we can see from this particular graphic that this area has about a 41% poverty rate. We see that adults not working is at about a 58% level, and the median income is only 52% of the median income for the state of Louisiana. So we're working in some high poverty areas. Let's move to the next slide. And basically what we're hoping to do in terms of our workforce training and development, we collaborate with the local leaders. We target more or less open houses. We develop training to the local level. We go out to the communities. We have a mobile computer facility that we take with us. And basically we help them more or less in terms of a ceremony, in terms of a closing ceremony, as well as review and planning with respect to their overall strategic plans. Let's go to the next slide. This is an example where we are out in the community. We work with the mayor's office primarily. We know they're in the leadership position and they can help us more or less in identifying problems in areas that need help. And this is just an example of some of the people that help us in the local community and training. Next slide, please. Some of the activities we do with workforce training is that of contract procurement, project management, Microsoft Office, QuickBooks, e-commerce, entrepreneurship, target marketing, computer basics. So we basically look at what on this list that that community needs, and we more or less tailor it to their particular program and needs. Next slide. This is just an example where we go out more or less and we take our computers with us. We set up a mobile computing lab. They just give us the space. Next slide, please. This is an example more or less of small business training. This was an example where we worked up in Northeast Louisiana in terms of providing them with the areas of training that they needed, such as Microsoft Excel, QuickBooks, and other various facilities. And these are all mayors up in the Northeast Louisiana Delta region. Next slide, please. As we know, in terms of African-American business firms, this is data from MBDA in terms of U.S. minority-owned firms. African-American businesses have a gross receipts of about $58,000 compared to non-minority businesses at about 10 times of $552,000. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we work with these small businesses to help them understand what they need more or less in terms of moving forward with their plans. Next slide. This is an example where we helped an individual entrepreneur to develop a resource center. So this individual came to one of our programs and got so excited, got all these individuals to volunteer and develop more or less a community resource center. Next slide. We also engage in entrepreneurship and innovation. Here we see more or less a conference that we developed more or less to provide information to our constituents at our conferences in terms of economic development and entrepreneurship. Next slide, please. We had a flood here in the Baton Rouge area in 2016 called the Great Flood, the 200 or 500-year flood. And I guess the question is, when disaster strikes, where do you go? Next slide. We had to recover, we had to rebuild. And so we had to change our programming as a result of this. And so we said, what can we do? And so we decided to put on an economic development conference to bring all the stakeholders together. Next slide, please. So from this, we looked at more or less EDA's programs in terms of building community resiliency. So we looked at what could we do as far as economics, housing, infrastructure systems, mitigation, things of this nature. And we built our conference around this in terms of building community resiliency. We had major federal agencies, EDA and various others to come in more or less and help individuals understand what they need to do to come back and build more resilient communities. Next slide. Also, in terms of this particular program, in terms of our conference, if you go on to the next slide, we basically came out of this with a creating sustainable neighborhood developers. So we basically helped the community to rebuild their communities, because a lot of people more or less were waiting for FEMA, waiting for insurance companies. And so a lot of individuals want to start on their own. So we helped them to understand what was needed in order to rebuild their communities. And so we still have this program today, which more or less helps individuals to develop business around real estate development. So this has been a very successful program for us. Next slide, please. We've also worked with the Native American community. In 2019, we put on an economic development conference, helped them to understand what was involved in terms of their entrepreneurial ecosystem and how they could diversify away from just that of casino gambling. Next slide, please. This is an example of the program. We talked about Louisiana Rural Economic Development. We had over 300 people at this conference. We found out about the uniqueness of the Native American community and how business could be done in terms of diversifying the Native American community. It was quite a successful program. And next slide. Out of that conference, we found that the individuals wanted to know more about education, workforce development, economic development, and also entrepreneurship. So the university system program has been quite successful for our university, for our college. We've been out in the community and it's made the university resources available for economic development out in the EDDs. So thank you very much, and any questions, I'll be happy to answer those at the end. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Andrews, thank you so much for that presentation. When you first sent me the slides, I thought, how's he going to fit this all into 10 minutes? And he did a phenomenal job. But more importantly, thank you so much for all the work that you and your colleagues have done, both in the Baton Rouge area, but also reaching further out throughout the state. Just that diversity of services is really inspiring to see. So thank you for that. And again, just a reminder, if you do have any questions for any of our speakers, please feel free to type them in the questions box, and we're going to get to as many of those at the end of our presentations. So next, we're going to hear from Justina Shaw and Jimmy Henry at Prairie View A&M University in Texas to learn a little bit more about the Rural Workforce Academy. So see Jimmy. So take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jimmy here. I serve as our program leader for our Community and Economic Development Unit at the Prairie View Cooperative Extension Program. I've been with the Extension Program for the last 19 or almost 19 years, working in community and economic development. And so over the past, I want to say 5 years, we've developed a huge interest in doing workforce development. Really got passionate about it shortly after Harvey, when we realized some of the work that we were doing in the community with linking resources to impacted families led to the need for skilled workers for rebuilding. So that put construction workforce development on our radar to add to our program. We've done different programs in the past. Prior to that, one of the more successful ones was with our energy audit program that our funding agency funded us again because it went so well. So we knew that we could do it. We knew that the community needed it. And so it was born. We started having conversations. We can go to the next slide. We started sharing our vision with the Economic Development Administration and started having conversations. We've always maintained a great relationship with the state office in Austin, Texas. And so we learned about a grant opportunity through them, and so started having more conversations around what we wanted to do, around the impact that we can make in communities doing workforce development. And so that also led us to have some conversations with our Houston-Galveston Area Council, which was all affected by Hurricane Harvey and other disasters. Our Houston-Galveston Area Councils covers about there are 13 counties, 134 cities, 7 million people, roughly 3 million jobs in that area. So we've had conversations with HGAC personnel. They've come to Prairie View, we've gone to them. It's been a great relationship. We kind of talked about the grant proposal, what things we could do to strengthen it, the kind of data that they shared was just super helpful in us submitting a grant application. And so it's been a great partnership with HGAC staff working with that to help us to be successful in the program. They funded or work with agencies that have been funded for grants through EDA, and so it was a great marriage. That's kind of how it got started, and it took some time. You know, we probably started, well, not probably, we started in 2018, late 2018, with working on the package, and then we didn't initially get funded, but funds came available and things just started happening from there. So I'll let Justina, who is leading the project, overseeing it, making sure that all the things are working well with it, kind of talk a little bit more about the project itself, but I just wanted to give a quick overview on how it came to pass. You're muted.
Next slide. Okay, so one of the things that I'm talking about is the Rural Workforce Academy, which was started out of our relationship with EDA in partnership with HGAC. Next slide. Okay, so the Rural Workforce Academy is a pilot program of the Community and Economic Development Unit here at Prairie View. We call ourselves CED, or Community Economic Development, and we are housed within our cooperative extension building. Inside this slide, you see a couple of photos of our participants. The one is welding, another one is, the other two are our electrical technicians learning how to wire a home. Next slide. We were also featured in an ad. I can put this on the website for you guys if you want to learn more about a look at how the Rural Workforce Academy is changing the lives of rural Texan residents. Next slide, please. Okay, so we were provided a 3-year grant. The award started on October 1st, 2019, and will end September 30th, 2020. Our last trade skill will end on June 25th, 2021. We wanted to give our students a year of focusing on job placement, also helping them understand the barriers while in the workplace, and then being able to track and follow them and support them for a full year. Our first class started on September 14th of 2020. I want to share with you guys some numbers and some success metrics, just to give you guys a sort of like an overview of how we're doing here at the Rural Workforce Academy. We are offering 1 electrical technician program for 11 weeks, 5 shielded metal arc welding, a 7-week program, 3 nurse aid programs, they both are 5 weeks, and 2 core construction, which is a 6-week program. Next slide. Our pilot program only allowed for 187 seats. As of right now, we have interviewed 280 people and enrolled 220 people for these seats. We do believe in a little bit of over-enrolling so that just in case we have some no-shows or cancels. So far to this day, we've received 1,380 completed applications. People are really excited about the welding skill trade program and the electrical technician, and you could say our application went viral. That's a good way of saying it. Next slide. So how do our students sort of navigate our process here at the Rural Workforce Academy? What we do is we try our best to eliminate as many barriers as possible, because our goal is to support them as they take this journey to pick up a new skill set and hopefully gain employment. So our application process is pretty simple. We try to use the enrollment process and the interviewing process of the application to navigate whether or not they're ready for joining our skilled trade programs. So first, the student will apply. We try to get them enrolled. If they pass their certification test and complete the required certification learning, they will receive a certificate of completion. Then we also focus on 8 hours of employment skill training classes and also some interviewing with potential workers, employers. And then we also work with the Workforce Solution here in Waller County and Liberty County to also support their continued needs. So right now in COVID, some of our students are having some food insecurities and then also some childcare needs. So our partnerships with external agencies like Workforce Solution, I think SIR, and then a couple of other programs are allowing for us to address some of the food insecurities. We're able to get them free COVID testing, and a few of them also receive transportation vouchers. So the one great thing about the Rural Workforce Academy is we didn't stay within just the institution of the university to say we're going to implement this, but we have so many arms to make us successful, and that is what is getting all our students to graduation. Next slide. Okay, how do we measure impact and some of the things that we're seeing right now? We have one cohort, and this cohort was made of 12 electrical technicians and 20 welding students. And 2 of them, when they started, on the day they started class, was employed less than 6 months. 9 of them were employed more than 6 months. 8 were unemployed less than 6 months, and 4 was unemployed more than 6 months. Next slide. Our highest level of completion just within that cohort, 5 have less than a high school diploma, 13 received a diploma or a GED, 1 received a 2-year education, and then 2 received a 4-year college degree. Additionally, purpose for enrolling in the training program, 9 said it will help them get a job or secure a job. 2 desire to gain certification in a trade. 6, help me get a better job than the one I have. And what that means is they're currently working at a full-time job, but they've already spoken to their employer. And so let's say someone who is just a medical tech, if they receive their CNA, they'll be given sort of maybe a $2 raise. And so they've already spoken to the employer, and we are working with those people to just get certified so that they can stay within their job, but then start a new role, which is very exciting. And then 7 was job and career advancement. We find this a lot with our welders. Many of them really want to get into welding, just never had the opportunity. Here down in Texas, a lot of young people have completed sort of an introductory course in welding in high school, and now they really want to understand, how do I get into it? How do I become a welder apprentice and then grow within the trade? So it's really great to see this. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we are at our last slide. So we just want to say thank you to our program partners, EDA, and then Prairie View A&M, and then also acknowledge some of our certification partners. Here at the Rural Workforce Academy, we actually, many of the skilled trades are in partnerships with other companies within the Houston area. So Professional Career Training Institute provides our welding and electrical, Optimum Nurse Aid Skills provide our nurse aid training, and then Workforce Solutions provide our job readiness training and skills. And that is all I have for you guys.
Great. Well, Justina and Jimmy, thank you so much for sharing with us a little bit more about the Rural Workforce Academy. It's a really inspiring pilot program, and we're excited to kind of see what the future holds for all of you that are really feeling an important need in your region. I do know there were some videos as well that you share with us. We'll make sure to get those out to everyone to learn a little bit more about this exciting opportunity. So thanks again to both of you. And with that, we're going to now pivot to hear a little bit more about access to relevant federal and capital resources. And up next is Doug Leinert from EDA, who will discuss the economic development integration resources at the federal level and also some cross-agency support. So take it away, Doug.
Thanks so much, Brett, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Doug Leinert, and I am the Director of Economic Development Integration at EDA. I've worked for EDA for just over 5.5 years, and I've been the Director of the Integration Practice for about 4.5 years, which is exactly how long the practice has been with the agency. It, as a practice, does not represent a new capacity at EDA per se, so much as it represents an extension and enhancement of EDA's core capacities as these pertain to facilitation, capacity building, and the investment of strategic and flexible program resources to support regional and local economic development. So the slide you see in front of you here represents, I guess, what you might call the life cycle of the integration practice. The core that you see in the middle there, coordinated investments in support of diverse regional economies. That is certainly what EDA strives to do, and the EDI team is here to support that through increased capacity, convening multiple stakeholders to identify and establish consensus in terms of priorities, convening funding partners with local and regional stakeholders, and leveraging those resources and in an aligned way for comprehensive project support. Next slide, please. Our practice is guided by three primary objectives that we established in 2016. These include helping potential applicants and even current grant recipients with increased access to federal resources. So making the process of identifying and leveraging federal resources an easier and less time-consuming process. Reduced administrative burdens. We work with our federal partners across the government to identify any areas where we can achieve economies of scale with respect to certain requirements and reduce the total administrative burden that comes with the award of federal resources. And finally, enhance collaboration, and that's certainly a primary theme for today's webinar. We are working across federal agencies to either establish new working partnerships or to enhance partnerships and relationships where these exist. Next slide, please. This slide starts to give you at least an illustrated example of why the integration practice is necessary and helpful within the federal landscape. Each of these symbols is for separate executive level agencies within the United States federal government. Next slide. And this slide represents a very small fraction of the various bureaus and program offices that exist within each of these separate executive level agencies and departments. And so again, these two slides help to illustrate the vast number of different departments, agencies, bureaus, and program offices that offer wide variety of different types of programs and other resources to support economic development and community development. And for those applicants who are not well versed in the different federal agencies and departments, these can represent basically a type of informational maze. And we as a practice are here to, among other things, help applicants to kind of navigate that maze and zero in on the resources that are best suited to support the priorities that they have identified at the local level. Next slide, please. For purposes of today's webinar, what I would like to focus on with respect to what the EDI team provides is the capacity building aspect of the work that EDA does. And so this basic model that you see on the slide here kind of represents, low capacity at the one end, where communities and potential applicants might really only be suited at the present time for some technical assistance and maybe some informational referrals. In the middle, you see emerging capacities where the full ability to develop a strategic plan and to implement that plan hasn't yet been reached, but a community or a region has sufficient capacity to at least begin having those kinds of strategic conversations with each other and with the federal government in search of solutions and resources to support those. And then finally, at the far end of the continuum, you see enhanced capacities, and that represents, as I just described, those places that have the capacity to develop and to implement a strategic plan. Next slide, please. We've come up with some wonderful new acronyms here in the economic development integration practice that I'd like to share with you this afternoon. And the first of these is the FIRE, or Federal Interagency Resource Exchange. This is a type of event that our team helps to facilitate with local and regional stakeholders. And in reference to the previous slide, these types of integration events are promoted and targeted to those communities and regions that have not yet established a strategic economic development plan and haven't identified their priorities, but they do recognize the need for action. They do recognize that they have some obstacles to economic growth that they would like to overcome. And so this type of event is primarily facilitated to establish relationships between local and regional stakeholders and federal program staff who work in various state and regional offices for different federal programs, and for an exchange of information between these intergovernmental partners, so that going forward after these events conclude, local and regional stakeholders have not just information about federal resources that can potentially be leveraged to support their priorities, but they also have the names and contact information of individuals who manage these various resources and who can be called upon to provide additional technical guidance and work with the community to leverage those. Next slide, please. And next slide again, please. The second wonderful acronym I'd like to introduce to you this afternoon is REDS. This is for an event that we call the Regional Economic Diversification Summit. As Dave kind of mentioned earlier about the SEDS strategic plan, the REDS is more of a process and not just a single event. There are four kind of main objectives that have been established for the initial summit and the subsequent project implementation work that proceeds from the summit. These include enhanced collaboration amongst intergovernmental and cross-sector partners. Again, finding ways to reduce the total administrative burden that is inherent to applying for and administering federal resources. Optimal resource alignment, again, to kind of emphasize what that means, it's really asking the stakeholders and potential applicants to work together and identify the most strategic and optimal use of multiple federal funding streams so that the outcomes of the various projects that are contemplated can be structured in a way that reinforce each other's benefits. And the resources that are leveraged are the best fit for the types of projects that are envisioned. And finally, and I think this is most critical to the REDS process itself, the summit is intended to help local regional stakeholders establish project implementation teams who will assume the responsibility to develop action plans and project management plans for the priority projects that have been identified. Next slide, please. So setting expectations for a summit and for that process is very important. Local and regional stakeholders who are interested in this need to understand right away that this is a local event. This is not a federal event or an EDA event. EDA and its federal partners are invited to attend and participate in this event and the process, but this is really something that is driven by local stakeholders, local partners, and their priorities and the subsequent agenda. It's not a single one-off event. It is a process. Participating in the summit is, not just attending, but really contributing expertise And finally, the follow through on project implementation, establishing that particular expectation is particularly critical to the success of the overall process and its objectives. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes some comments and other information that we've received subsequent to some of these REDs that have been scheduled over the past couple of years. So Weirton, West Virginia, Port Townsend, Washington. We are very interested to receive this kind of feedback from participants in order to better understand, the extent to which the process works and helps to meet identified needs and priorities, and also to make any adjustments so that this process can be more useful and better support local and regional economic development priorities. Next slide, please. This is just more feedback and more information about REDs that was held in the state of Oregon. Next slide, please. So with apologies for the fact that that was a very fast overview of a great deal of content, I just simply want to say thanks once again for the opportunity to participate in today's webinar. Again, the integration team here at EDA is here to support and enhance EDA's overall core strengths and capacities. We have a team at EDA headquarters, but we also have staff in each of EDA's 6 regional offices, and it is their job to support integration at the regional office level. So thank you very much.
Yeah, Doug, thank you so much for that presentation. And I'm sure a lot of folks on the call are relieved to know that there are federal partners out there like yourselves and your colleagues that can really help kind of navigate that federal family with resources and opportunities. So thanks for that. Great, so our final presentation will be from Joanne Hill at the Minority Business Development Agency. Joanne's going to talk about some upcoming initiatives, competitions, and a really exciting new workforce development partnership with Amazon. So Joanne, take it away.
Thanks so much, Brett, and thank you to our sister agency, EDA, for the invitation to participate in this very timely and vital session today. I have to say that I am a proud HBCU graduate. I graduated from Benedict College, located in Columbia, South Carolina, where I was born and raised. And also a little bit about my background. I've been with the MBDA now for 2 decades that I just celebrated about 30 days or so ago. I started with the agency in the Atlanta region, where we had a good relationship with the AU Center, HBCUs, and a number of others throughout the Southeastern region, where we worked very closely with the Atlanta Regional Office for the EDA as well. And so that's just a little bit about who I am, a little bit about my background. Did a lot with the disaster recovery going back to Hurricane Rita, and as well as Katrina and Rita back in the 2000s. But anyways, I wanted to dive into my presentation. Next slide, please. MBA serves over 11 million minority-owned firms. These firms generate 8 million jobs and contribute $1.8 trillion in revenue to the U.S. economy. These firms help expand the U.S. economy, strengthen local economies, such as what we're talking about right now, as well as support job creation. Next slide. Our vision is economic prosperity for all American businesses, and we are the only agency, the only federal agency that is specifically designed to promote the growth and competitiveness of these firms. To compete globally, MBEs must be on a journey of continuous transformation, and that is a key driver of our passion. Next slide, please. Our impact is centered on 3 pillars: access to capital, access to contracts, and access to market opportunities. We help firms to secure both public and private sector contracting opportunities. And in fiscal year 2019, these firms generated $1.6 billion in capital. Those are the business centers you'll hear me talk about a little bit later in my presentation that help these firms. In the area of access to in the area of access to capital, they generated $1.6 billion, and that was both traditional as well as alternative sources of capital. In the area of contracts, for both public and private sector contracts, our centers facilitated access to $3.1 billion in contracts. And in the area of markets, our export centers helped MBEs to secure more than $300 million in export transactions. Next slide, please. Under the CARES Act, Congress appropriated $10 million for MBDA and supplemental funding for education, training, and advisement to these two small and minority firms to help those that have been impacted by COVID. As you know, there were a lot of them. These grants were distributed to 30 existing MBDA business centers, in addition to 5 national minority chambers of commerce. You can see the award period there in the slide. Next slide, please. Our investments. And here's where I think you play a role, in particular, those of you that are from the HBCU community. We have 26 MBDA business centers. That's our franchise model business center that you see there on the left side by state. We also have specialty centers. Those centers are in the areas of advanced manufacturing, exporting, as well as a federal procurement center. We have a number of initiatives. Our latest, newest portfolio of initiatives includes our American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian initiatives and projects. We've had those for many years. Our newer initiatives include entrepreneurship education for formerly incarcerated. We have our first HBCU that's a part of that portfolio, as you will notice, Morgan State University, that was recently awarded. We have an Inner City Innovation Hub initiative. We have an MBDA Enterprise and Women of Color Business Center that was also recently awarded, and we have 4 of those. And then we have what we're very excited about is a Minority Growth Equity Fund initiative to raise $1 billion in funds for MBEs to help them with growth and expansion. Next slide, please. Upcoming grant competitions. If you don't take anything else away from what I share with you today, please make certain that you take note of the upcoming MBDA grant competition that will be announced this fall. Stay on the lookout for it. You see our website listed there. Grants will also be announced via a federal register notice. We don't have enough HBCUs competing for our grant competitions. We're so happy that we had Morgan State to apply to this one. And this new set that will be coming out for those 26 business centers that you saw that are part of our franchise model, that's the competition that's going to be announced. There will be other grants that will be announced as well in the coming year, but I wanted to give you a heads up that the business center franchise model that provides the one-on-one assistance will be coming up real soon. Next slide, please. The $1 billion fund is a fund that MBDA granted to the national, a grant that we awarded to the National Association of Investment Companies, which is the largest network of diverse private equity firms and hedge funds. We awarded them this grant to help raise $1 billion in growth capital into minority business enterprises. The goals with this initiative are to quantify the demand for and current supply of capital focused on these firms, to leverage the extensive expertise that they bring in their broad network of equity investors who have an appetite for investing in MBEs, and to drive substantial job and wealth creation in the minority business community and minority communities. Next slide, please. Our Enterprising Women of Color initiative. Women of color represent 39% of the total female population in the United States, and they account for 89% of net new women-owned businesses. We realized this, and the leadership vision was to launch this initiative, which has been remarkably successful. We launched it in 2019. We've had, without going into the names of celebrities and big names, you can go to our website and look at our Enterprising Women of Color initiative, and you will see some of those that have participated. But this initiative in particular strives to create pathways to economic empowerment for women of color for the following reasons: to grow their networks, to expand their client base, and to connect to entrepreneurial ecosystems. This initiative has collaborated with several Fortune 500 companies, industry executives, and successful entrepreneurs to produce interactive programming, tools, and resources to promote their growth and expansion. Just this fiscal year, more than 10,000 attendees have registered for these events, and there's still more to come. We have one that's coming up, a new event with the American Indian, Alaska Native Hawaiian group. That's going to be very fascinating. This is American Heritage Month for American Indians, and so we try to align our initiatives in alignment with complementary, synergistic events, activities, dates for major milestones for the demographic that we serve. Next slide, please. And this is our newest partnership that I'm very, very excited about, that I have helped to build and cultivate and expand upon as an agency with the Amazon Corporation. This particular aspect of our partnership deals with the Amazon Web Academy. Next slide, please. This initiative is centered on building a student-to-workforce pipeline. Heard throughout the presentation today, I know I took keen note of Dr. Andrews mentioning the workforce training and development pathways, the e-commerce that he talked about. And thank you for sharing and referencing the MBDA SBO data. And at Prairie View, all of the training and development and certifications that you offer. I think that this partnership that I'm going to talk about here is an exceptional complement to what you're doing and how you're leveraging the University Center synergies with the EDA grants. Next slide, please. So the growing demand for cloud skills. According to LinkedIn data, cloud computing was the #1 hard skill that companies needed most in 2009. The survey of 451 research shows that 90% of IT decision makers report cloud skill shortages. Next slide, please. The Amazon Web Services Academy. This Web Services Academy is, first of all, free of charge. Amazon, through our partnership, will accelerate training your staff if you decide you'd like to have this training offered to your students. They will provide the training for your professors to offer the training. The curriculum is developed and maintained by the Amazon Web Services. They have proposed secondary program integration. The courses are aligned to the AWS certification, and students leave there employment ready. Next slide, please. It's a rigorous AWS authored curriculum. The AWS Academy students take courses that give them the opportunity to develop a range of skills and expertise, including foundational cloud concepts, architecting, developing operations, and data analytics. Next slide, please. Some of the AWS Academy member institutions that are delivering this training certification includes a community college you see there. Louisiana State University has it. Miami-Dade, and then you see several others located throughout the United States, as well as a couple international. We have the Universidad de Sao Paulo, New Zealand, as well as Singapore, and there are many others, in the London School of Economics and Political Science also is offering it. Next slide, please. To learn more about this training certification that you can offer, which I think is a phenomenal complement to what you're already offering under this umbrella and through this partnership with EDA and your students and your communities, from what I've heard today, I think this is an excellent complement. And you would be leveraging first mover advantage if you get on board with it, because I know we rolled it out at the this year's White House Initiative on HBCUs. At our exhibit booth, we had an Amazon representative there, and this is who she is, Ms. Angel Duncan, who is the Manager of Global Growth and Equity Initiatives at the Amazon Web Services Academy. I have her contact information for you here, as well as her cell phone number. As you will note, she has asked that you text her if you'd like to get her right away, because she is very busy, as you can imagine, but she would love to talk with you and get you signed up to offer this certificate training at your universities. Next slide, please. Another initiative that we launched with the Amazon Corporation that I led is the Minority Business and Technology Initiative. Sun, Moon, and Stars aligned, where the agency was planning to roll out this initiative before COVID came about. COVID came about and really hit the pedal to the metal, if you will, on the imperative and urgency to be e-commerce ready. Through this initiative, we offered a roadshow, a virtual roadshow for how to become a seller on the Amazon Business Marketplace. It was launched back in April. During that time period, we had more than 2,000, nearly 3,000 attendees, closer to 3,000, that came on board and learned how to become a seller on the Amazon Business Marketplace. They have a very sophisticated offering where they also help these firms through an integrator platform on how to list, promote, and posture their products and services, primarily products, on the Amazon Business Marketplace. It also enables these firms to increase their sales, both domestically and internationally. They get access to coaches for products listed, as well as B2B opportunities to promote business to customer, as well as B2B business to business opportunities for them. Next slide, please. Our plan at MBDA is winning the future now. The world, of course, is experiencing the highest rate of change and innovation that will disrupt every industry that we know today. Our initiatives focus on helping MBEs to grow today while preparing them to meet the industry needs of tomorrow. Our solutions are centered on 3 pillars: digital, global, and a think tank. We have a new Office of Policy Analysis and Development that we've established, where we'll be bringing you more data, like the data that was referenced earlier. We have some new reports that I cannot put out right now, but they are in the hopper to be rolled out in the near term. All of them centered on the kind of data that you need to make the value and business case for the economic imperative of supporting minority business enterprises in your communities and throughout America. Next slide, please. Thanks so very much for the opportunity. It's an honor to be here with you today. You have our website, our contact number, and if you have any questions for me, please do not hesitate. My email is jhill@mbda.gov, and I would be more than happy. If I can't answer the question, I'll find someone that can. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Joanne. Really appreciate that. Some very interesting initiatives underway, and we'll all keep an eye out for that upcoming opportunity for funding as well that you mentioned earlier in the presentation. And congrats on 20 years at the agency. Really exciting, and you've certainly left your mark. So Thanks for that. So yeah, so we've got about 10 minutes left. Real quickly on the screen here, you can see some additional information, lots of links and resources. I know we threw a lot at you today, but again, all of these slides will be made available afterwards on EDA's website, as well as a recording. So with that, we've had a few questions come through, and I encourage all of our speakers to, again, turn on their webcam so we can have a little bit of a conversation here, and I'll try to get through a few of these questions. So we'll have the rest of the panel join me on this virtual stage. Excellent, great. So I'll just try to get through a few of these. Again, time is short, but some questions that did come through. And one of these questions is asking about kind of the sustainability of this effort and partnership between EDA and the HBCUs. Asking about, what is the sustainability of this effort kind of moving forward? Are there any plans to formalize a partnership beyond the University Center Network and formalize a partnership between EDA and the HBCUs through MOUs or other functions? So anyone who would like to address that, perhaps from EDA's perspective about kind of what the long-term vision is.
Brett, let me maybe start with that. That is certainly, some of the things you mentioned are certainly possibilities. But I think that part of what we want to try and accomplish today is to just set the table, so to speak, for both the HBCUs who are participating and the EDDs in their states and regions to begin reaching out to each other to become kind of better acquainted as organizations. Dave and Bernadette both kind of highlighted the fact that, EDA's approach to regional economic development is to support local and regional priorities as reflected in the CEDS, and with capacity support from university centers. And in the context of this webinar series, we want the university centers to kind of know what are the EDDs in the states and regions where you are located. But we also want the EDDs to have a better sense of the HBCUs that are their neighbors, and to identify these as an important regional asset that can be leveraged along with other assets for regional economic development planning and project implementation.
Got it, great. Thanks so much, Doug. Yeah, really seeing this as a really kind of fundamental step and getting all of us at the table together. So excited to hear that. Jimmy, good to see you on screen, because we do have a question for you, as well as Justina and Dr. Andrews as well. A lot of folks here are really interested in all the initiatives that were happening on the ground, and had a question here about the impact of COVID-19 on some of these initiatives. And so for you and Justina, and also Dr. Andrews, how are you still able to kind of continue momentum? A lot of these projects that you're talking about, really involve a lot of kind of face-to-face engagement, on the ground in the communities, and of course those training elements as well through the Workforce Academy. So if any of you could kind of share how you've been able to kind of pivot and respond and still deliver these services kind of at this unprecedented time. So whoever would like to go first.
We definitely had a lot of delays because of that, and the mandate to stay at home and so forth, and still kind of deal with them in our own ways. Justina's been great in working with our trainers, working with our participants, and accommodating the current environment that we're in. I'll let Justina kind of comment on some of the things that we're doing on a daily basis as it relates to just being protecting the students.
Sure. So some of the things that we do is everyone that comes into the program, we do a 1 hour sort of like training to get them prepared for classes. Another advantage that we sort of kind of have is our welding courses are actually outdoors. They're in the barn. So that kind of allows for a little bit more circulation of cleaning the air kind of thinking. Additionally, we keep our classroom sizes short, and we keep our some of our classes are in auditorium, so they're really spread out, and we have to wear a mask within classrooms. But in terms of promoting, our applications are online, and we don't allow anyone in the building unless they were accepted to the course. So that has helped. But as of right now, our classes are in person, they are live, and we've had 0 cases.
Great. Excellent. Yeah. Dr. Andrews, please. Yeah.
We've seen some advantages in the sense of adapting new technology. We've had a lot of technology upgrades. We recently had a leadership conference where we had individuals from all around the country talking about the role of entrepreneurship in leadership. So we've really taken advantage of these opportunities to have individuals not only from around the Baton Rouge and Northeast Louisiana area, but from around the whole country. So we've had seminar programs, we've had our in-class sessions, as well as using the virtual technology to actually enhance our programs.
Wonderful, great. Yeah, great to hear you're pressing forward full speed ahead in spite of everything. So thanks for that. We have a quick question, I guess, for Doug, asking about the FIRE events and kind of, is there a schedule, kind of what, I think some folks are excited about this. And I guess it also relates to my previous question about, are you having virtual offerings as well, kind of what it looks like to have the FIRE engagement?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I'll go in reverse order. Yes, we can, EDA can facilitate and convene virtual versions of these events while we're still in the pandemic. And we have, in fact, been doing that throughout the year since March. In terms of actually scheduling any of these, as with most of everything else that EDA provides in terms of assistance, this is driven by local and regional demand. And so the first step to take is to reach out to the Economic Development Integration staff person at the regional office in the Austin region. And the contact information is available on the slide deck for today's webinar. But just reach the integrator and discuss your interests, the interest of your community or region, and he will work with you to pull that event together.
Great, thanks, Doug. Another question coming through, asking about some of the workforce development opportunities. So the question is saying, are workforce training opportunities available to high schoolers or high schoolers pursuing college credit? So I guess Jimmy and Justina, that's directed towards you about high schoolers being engaged in some of these initiatives.
We are looking at 18 and up. So if there are 18 and I don't think we have any high school students that are 18. Justina, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's our age group, and we're looking to move them into a job position. You're about to say something?
Yeah, agreed. I agree.
Great.
I work directly with high schoolers, but we've made available programs, and we've worked with individuals in the community. There's a program here called the Futures Fund, and they basically do training. They do coding to high schoolers, and we've worked with them on that particular program. So we look forward to working with them even in the future because they're expanding their operations. So we look forward to this coding and e-commerce initiative going down into the high school level.
Great. Excellent. We have a SEDS question here. I'm not sure if Dave Ives is still available, but just a question here about if my university did not participate in the SEDS process, are they still able to kind of access resources and opportunities through the SEDS and through the EDD? So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm still here. Actually, my camera's not on, but yes, yeah. The short answer to that question is yes, absolutely. If they haven't been engaged in the process yet, it doesn't mean that they can't jump in and do so. So, we would highly encourage that particular university to reach out to the EDD and make that connection, or reach out to the EDA regional office and the state point of contact, the EDR, and they can put you in contact with the EDD. But either way, yes, it's very possible to get engaged in that process and become an active participant in that economic development planning. So we would highly encourage that.
Great. Thanks, Dave. And yeah, so we've hit the 90-minute mark. There is one other question here I want to get to. I think it'll kind of help kind of put the whole discussion today in perspective and context. So the question says, consistent with EDA's economic aggregator and integrator role, please talk about how EDA and others can aggregate federal action that prioritizes or advantages HBCUs to leverage locally to further position the HBCU as local conduits to federal investment. So I know I kind of bungled reading that question there too, but I guess just overall, what's the big picture? You know, how can we kind of leverage assets from both the federal area and the local communities? We've been hearing through that all day. But any of you want to kind of weigh in here as kind of final reflections on kind of what opportunities we have moving ahead?
Brett, I'll just offer a couple of thoughts I have in response to that. You know, the comment that was, you know, made at the beginning, you know, from Dennis Albert about the SEDS process and participation in that process, giving various organizations a kind of seat at that table, and the resulting plan, therefore reflecting their particular objectives and perspectives. I would absolutely encourage each HBCU participating in today's webinar to you know, pursue that with the economic development districts in your states and regions. The SEDS is just so important when it comes to EDA's additional assistance. It's the foundational document, it's that blueprint or roadmap. And it isn't just that it is, you know, plays that role or serves that purpose, important as that may happen to be, but it's also a kind of a prerequisite for EDA grant dollars, implementation project dollars. So in other words, applications to EDA for you know, some of our main project grant funds will not be considered for funding if the project in question doesn't have a relationship to an existing SEDS document. And so when it comes to pursuing that kind of assistance and implementing projects, becoming a regular contributor and stakeholder to the SEDS process is one step. The integration staff in our regional offices can be there to support kind of broader, more comprehensive interagency efforts to support economic and community development goals and objectives at the local and regional level through the integration events that we sponsor and through making connections between intergovernmental partners, HBCUs, and federal program staff.
Okay, thanks, Doug. And hey, we have one late breaking question here, but I think it's important and one we can wrap up on. And that's a question for Dr. Andrews here and Jimmy as well, about kind of, you know, what recommendations do you have, you know, at the universities for better getting engaged with EDA and EDA ecosystem? You know, we might have some folks here that haven't engaged with federal partners in the past or maybe intimidated, hopefully not after this this session. But what are kind of your kind of advice or tips for really kind of making that first step or really nurturing those relationships with federal partners?
Well, from my perspective, I think you have to be engaged in the local community. In other words, Louisiana has had its share of disasters, and when those things occur, you want to look for all support levels and programs that are available. So I would say more or less, you have to more or less be engaged in the community. You know, look at all of the local, state, as well as federal resources, and also in terms of grant writing. You know, you have to put the time in terms of writing an effective grant, and you have to convince program managers that you're going to be able to hit the targets as far as the particular goals and objectives that you set.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. One of the other things that we've done, aside from some of those things that Dr. Andrews mentioned, is just curating or working on a relationship with EDA throughout the years, not just when we come looking for something. So oftentimes I would be in the Austin area, state office. I just drop by, kind of share some of our programs that we have going on, and just building relationships that way, shooting the email to that office, letting them know what we have going on. And I think just over time, just building that relationship helps when it is time to start asking for funding, and then you do have questions, and then they'll answer the phone or respond to an email because you've kind of built a relationship. But I think that's key. I think that's just key in any building any kind of relationship with any organization or any person. It's just reaching out, sharing, and that's just what we try to do.
Absolutely. Great. I couldn't think of a better way to end our time together. And that was really kind of the whole motive behind these webinars, is to start building those relationships, put some names with faces, and have that information available. So we hope that this is the first step and many more conversations that we can all have. So I want to thank all of our speakers for their time today with the presentations. A lot of great content. Again, all that information will be shared with attendees afterwards and made available at EDA's website as well. And please feel free to follow up and build those connections. Of course, we're living in this virtual world, but in some ways that makes it easier in some ways to connect with each other, I think, through some of these platforms like we're on today. So with that, thanks for sticking on for a few minutes longer. Again, feel free to make sure to follow up with any of us afterwards. And with that, we're going to close things out. And thanks again, and have a good rest of the day. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Brett.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.